All right, so in the last video, I showed you how you can get Bootstrap, and we did that going to my main topics here under topic download, and we saw that we could utilize a CDN, or what's called a content delivery network. So we are utilizing somebody else's website that exists on the internet, a CSS page that exists on the internet, and I told you we might also be able to download it. Now, before I continue, I want to make sure that you recognize that we are, and you have to pay attention to this, that we are linking to Bootstrap 5. We're using Bootstrap 5. We're using Bootstrap 5's documentation. This is really important because if for some reason you are working on a version 4, maybe you're working on someone else's code, or you didn't pay attention to the link that you linked to, this is version 4. And you can use version 4, that's not a problem. But notice in this CDN link that it is specifically targeting version 4. Now, version 4 and version 5 are very different. So if you're using a link to version 4, but you are in version 5's documentation and using those classes, it won't work. So be very careful when you're using Bootstrap that you are matching the version, and I mean the main version. The .62 doesn't matter. So if your link says 4.0.1 or whatever, that doesn't matter. Make sure that you are using version 4 in this case, or I'm going to go back to where I was, which was version 5. Actually, it was 5.3, but it even says there's a newer version. So again, the main issue is, back to read the docs. So the main issue is that I am in version 5. Now the rest is relatively not so much of a big deal. So main thing is I'm going to use Bootstrap 5, and I need to make sure that I'm in Bootstrap 5's documentation using the guidelines outlined here. All right, now that I've said all that, let's look at another way to download our Bootstrap. So it even says download source. So if you click on this, you're going to get access to a zip file. And so once you get that zip file, you want to bring that zip file into your folder. Now, I think I can just drag mine in from another location. Copy that folder. Okay, so you're going to end up with something that looks like this once you unzip it. And so I put it in my Bootstrap 5 folder, and I'm going to look at its contents. And it didn't pull over what I thought it was going to, so let me do that real quick here. So I was trying to be quicker so you don't have to watch me unzip the file, because I figure you know how to do that. All right, so once it's unzipped and you bring it into your project, you're going to see that you're going to get a CSS folder. Whoa, that's a lot of files, I know. And a JS, some JavaScript files, which I don't know how to write JavaScript, but that's okay. You don't have to. All right, so let's look at how we would then implement utilizing Bootstrap locally with files that exist in our project rather than linking it to an external web page, which is right. Yeah, whichever one you want to do. All right, so what I'm going to do then is let's look at this first piece right here. So remember, it's linking to let's look, Bootstrap min CSS file. Bootstrap min CSS file. So if we look in the files that we got from our zip folder and I open up the CSS folder, we're going to see a bunch of CSS stuff, but we're going to find this bootstrap min.css, which we're currently linking to on the internet. Let's see if we downloaded it and we have it existing local. Bootstrap min.css. We sure do. So that means I can change this link to my local folder, and I'll do that here in a minute. But what I want to show you is, what is bootstrap min.css? Well, let's look at what we have here. First of all, recognize there's version 5, so pay attention to your versions. And, well, it looks very scary. Okay, let me unscary it. Let's take Bootstrap, the word min out of Bootstrap, which means minified, by the way, and let's look at just Bootstrap CSS. So this is a CSS page, and if you look at it, it should look familiar. This is just CSS. So Bootstrap is nothing more than CSS that somebody else has written, and in the process of writing it, for example, we're just utilizing their style sheets. So they have classes defined, they have horizontal rules. And if you scroll down and look at this word, isn't this an interesting word? It looks like Bootstrap out of the box is also responsive. So it handles a lot of the media queries and the things that we were writing. And we're going to look at that later, but I just wanted you to see that it was here. So it's a Bootstrap. Bootstrap is a CSS file. Somebody else wrote all the CSS to. We're simply linking to that CSS file and utilizing it in our project so that we don't have to write all of this fancy stuff that's already written for us to make our job faster, easier, more efficient. So what is the min then? Well, if you look at the beginning of this, all of these nice, easy to read lines, like as a developer, I'd rather read these lines, but as a website, a browser doesn't care about all these spaces. And so a browser on the internet should be served a minified version of our CSS, because all this does is it takes away all the white space and line returns, then it makes it easy for you and I to see. But this is a faster file for the browser. So the browser has a smaller file. It can parse through this much quicker. But I guarantee you that if you were a developer and you gave to your teammate a file to work on that looks like this, you probably aren't going to be a teammate for long. So we're going to link to our min CSS file. All right. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to take these two folders. You can keep it in this folder if you want, but that's to me a little bit much. So you can leave it there, or I'm just going to move mine into the main project, into the root of the project. And so now if I look what I have going on here, I'm going to delete this folder because I don't really want it anymore. And I have a CSS file that I know I can use, and I have a JavaScript file that I can use. So let's look back at our index page. All right, so let's look at our link here. Our link has an href to an external CSS page, but now I have that exact file here in the CSS folder right there. So I'm going to get rid of all the external stuff and point to the CSS folder that I have currently in my local folder, right? And so I'm going to do the same thing with my JavaScript. So if I look at our JavaScript, now I know we don't know much about JavaScript yet, but that's okay. What we can see is JavaScript uses this script and src instead of link href that we've done over here. So technically these two are doing the same thing. This is pointing to a file called bootstrap bundle min.js. So if I look in my JavaScript folder, I will bet I will find a bootstrap bundle min.js. Bootstrap bundle min.js right here. So the synonymous link then is, if I want to do it locally, I'm just going to put it into my JavaScript folder here. And then I told you in the last video that this is just for security across the internet. So I really don't need that because I'm not getting a file from the internet. It's going to be in my local folder here. So I'm going to delete all that. And now I've simplified the version. And so this is doing the same thing. I'm just doing it locally from the files that exist here in my project as opposed to the files that exist out on the internet. Now, the final test is let's look at this page and see if it still works. And it still has all of that CSS styling that we saw in the original, in our first video. So perfectly. So which two should you use? You use the one that came into your head first.